Well, that's over. That's it's ended. The secret invasion is no longer a secret. It's more of just an invasion now. Uh, and I mean, that's what we got. I was hoping that there'd be more exciting bits for me to talk about. We might be able to get all of this done in a brief conversation because that batch of footage that I was able to obtain was not a lot. So I might be missing some details here or there that we'll find out down the line, or maybe sometimes life just isn't that interesting. So I am Agent Prescod, here for what I imagine is our final thing for the scrolls. Scrolls, and you are
Mary.
Agent Mary, the only person I can trust to. I mean, now this scroll thing is public, and you haven't come out as a scroll, so I feel like I was probably right about you this whole
I
time.
said I would scroll like 8 times during this, but that's all.
No, no, but you were kidding. So, um, let's talk about. There's like, I don't know, two or three things that happen over the course of like 30 minutes. Um, do we want to start with the big one that everyone's talking about, or do we want to talk about the one that still baffles me the most?
Well, I'm just gonna start by saying this was awful.
Yeah,
I need to get that out of the way. I sometimes like to watch it a second time or more, like depending before we do this, just so it's fresh. And I couldn't get myself to do that. I just didn't want to. It was so bad. It's the first time, and I said this to you. I'm like actively upset this exists,
yeah,
and like the whole universe, like it's just ruins, not ruins, but like makes a lot of things like worse for
yeah.
like so many things. So as much as some of the other series weren't necessarily great or there were episodes I didn't love, like it's like okay, but this just like just upsetting.
I I agree with you. In that I think this is the first time I've watched this sort of footage and then been like, I mean, it's like what you said. I almost wish it didn't exist because now they have to acknowledge it and it has to impact something. And it will, because even though it feels like nothing really happened, like stuff did technically happen. So likely it will be a thing going forward. And I just wish that it wasn't. And I think the difference between this for me and some of the other problems I've had with past, as you would say, Marvel shows, um, is like I remember when we talked about Moon Knight back in the day, like when that finale came out and you didn't like it, it was almost more upsetting, like viscerally, because you like the rest of the show. So then when the finale stunk, it was like, what the heck? But with this, it was like we haven't really liked a lot of the show, and then the finale was about as bad as we kind of assumed it was gonna be. So we're not even like I'm not even mad. Like I'm mad, but I'm not angry. I'm kind of just like it's almost funny. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not raging about it because I'm not like you were so close. I'm like, why did you do any of this?
Yeah, I think in like with Moon Knight, it's a good example. Like I was disappointed with the finale, like within the show's context, but now I'm disappointed in Secret Invasion within like the MCU as a whole, which is also a difference. But yeah, um, but with that said, we can get into whatever point we were gonna get into.
All right. Well, let's just start with the big one because I feel like that's what is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, which is that I was right, and 100% telegraphed from the beginning of these 6 episodes. Gaia ends up fighting Gravik in this big CGI Super Scroll battle that is just bananas. I remember um, a while back, like a couple months ago, there was all this talk online that the future of Marvel or the upcoming projects or whatever, again, terms that people keep using about real footage from the world that I'm in. And let me tell you, it is a mess out there now. It's crazy. I don't know if you saw the end of the episode, but like I'm staying in this secret room that no one knows the address of. It was gonna be more like anime inspired, that the fight scenes would be crazier and more over the top, and there'd be more like, we're gonna fully indulge the comic book side of all of this, and that got me really excited. And they've executed that fairly well in some regards. Like, I think the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the now famous hallway fight scene in that, kind of embraces that with Nebula and stuff. But it felt like that's what they were trying to do here. Like, they thought this was this big, like, how could we ever top something this cool moment? And it just wasn't. It didn't look good. They had this insane budget. Why did it look like that? It didn't really make sense. It wasn't like a super well choreographed fight. There's so many questions raised by how this whole process works. So in case anyone doesn't know what happened, I don't know why you're watching this if you don't, but let me lay it out for you. Gravik at the beginning of this episode is just chilling by himself in his secret lair, waiting. I don't know if he knew that or thought or assumed that Fury was going to show up, but he was vibing. He was waiting. Fury walks into a nuclear waste zone and is coughing and stumbling around. I think I wrote down in my notes this. I had subtitles on, and the subtitle just said "continues coughing," and then I wrote down "continues coughing" is the epitome of this show. And yeah, that's the vibe. And then they have this big dramatic thing where they kind of hint that Gravik and him did have a past, but they don't elaborate on it at all. And then, surprise, it's not Fury. What? You mean to tell me that Fury wasn't walking through a nuclear fallout zone? That's crazy. It's Gaia. And then Gaia and Gravik both get Super Skrull powers, but not just Super Skrulls. They're like super mega Skrulls. And they both have the powers of like 13 different Marvel characters that they just spin around using and then fight each other, and they go up in the sky and they go through buildings, and then it ends with Gravik dying in an incredibly unceremonious way. This whole show, they kind of just have him get like blasted through the stomach and fall over, and there's like very little fanfare, and I'm just what?
Which also, they have Extremis, and that seems to heal every other thing. So
that's a good point. There's too many. The more we look at this fight, the less it's gonna make sense. That's all I'm saying. I'm also thinking, okay, so there's got to be a list somewhere I can pull up of the characters, but some that come to mind. Some make sense. Again, I think that Captain Marvel DNA, that's really over the top, and now we have this Skrull who's like the most powerful being in the entire universe, and I don't know how they're going to handle that going forward. But Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel DNA, okay, I can see why they'd want that. Maybe they could go after that. I don't understand having Winter Soldier's DNA. I mean, the mechanical arm isn't genetic, and the rest of it is very ill-defined. Ghost was not at the Battle of Earth, but her DNA is there. So I don't know. Maybe they explain that later, but I don't know why complicate it that way.
I know. I think presumably, apparently that and Abomination, which I didn't pick up on, but I saw.
Oh yeah, I did, because at one point Gravik gets Abomination ears.
Yeah, so I think we're supposed to. I don't know who thinks we're supposed to, but I think from that we're supposed to think that they were there.
Or
okay,
there's going to be another reveal down the line, which I don't know why they would do this. That it's like they didn't just harvest Battle of Earth, they also harvested, because Abomination and Ghost are both characters who were in some sort of like government confinement at some point. So it's possible that they got their DNA from that. I don't know. But yeah, Ghost, who most of the plot of Ant-Man and the Wasp revolves around the fact that Ghost powers are incredibly unstable and difficult to control and constantly put her on the verge of death. They both have that now, but they seem fine with it, so that's good. What else? Oh, Corvus Glaive. Corvus Glaive. Apparently, Corvus Glaive's magic is genetic too, so that's fun.
It's just like, well, and she has Captain Marvel powers, but yet in the Marvels they all switch powers every time they use them. So in theory, she should be switching with them now.
That's true.
And I don't believe she does that.
I suppose we'd have to wait to find out how they explain why they're switching in the Marvels movie. Maybe that could be I don't know. There's a lot of questions, and most of them don't have answers. And I think they were hoping we wouldn't ask them, but here we are, asking them because they're glaring, and that's where we're at. And it's not a good fight scene. That's the worst thing. If it was like incredibly well choreographed and super super rad, I'd be like, okay, maybe I can look past a little bit, but it's not. It doesn't look good. Gaia turns her arm into Drax's arm, and the arm has tattoos on it. Why?
I don't think they know how DNA works, to be real honest with you.
I don't. Very little science involved in this science experiment.
Yeah.
They went out on a hope and a dream, and somehow both worked. I just don't. I don't know.
I truly, and the fact that Gaia became a super scroll because Gravik just casually decided to like undergo that process with Fury just chilling right there on the ground. I'm like, what?
I was also wondering, was he just super I mean, I think he was just confident Fury was going to die, so it didn't matter. But also, if you're giving him superpowers, what if that would save him? Have you done the science to know that it would only work on Skrull blood? Is that can't be right?
Also, I truly like, you're a scroll. Like, I feel like in the back of your mind, you should be thinking somebody could be a scroll. Maybe not.
I was thinking, I was like, this is your whole shtick. How are you not picking up on this? You should have like technology that tells you. And he should be smart enough to know that. I get that Fury's kind of washed in this show, but he should also be smart enough to think there is a chance that Fury's not dumb enough to just walk into a nuclear fallout zone. You know?
With the Avengers DNA.
Yeah, with just handing you the Avengers DNA. Maybe ask even one question. Just try it. Give it a shot. I don't know.
Like, that whole quote unquote twist was just not cool or interesting or like creative, but at the same time, I think this show like needed and wanted it and thought it was. Yeah. And so it's also just like, okay, like that. I wish that was just Fury and we just had some more stakes there, but no,
the thing is, like, watching this episode, there were several times in my head where I thought, this is actually not a terrible idea if it was executed entirely differently. I even like the idea of a show like, if they decided this was going to be Old Man Fury in the same way that Logan is like Old Man Logan, and it's designed to be the final Wolverine story or the final Nick Fury story, because he's been around for a minute, and I get that people like him and he wants to, but like, if you were going to give him a project focused on him and you wanted it to be the end of his story in the MCU, like, this was it. And honestly, the idea that after a lifetime of always being 3 steps ahead of everybody, you then have to realize, like, you're not anymore, but you can do the things people like. You can still surprise people by doing something they don't think you'll do. And the idea of him like walking into a nuclear fallout zone because it's the only way to stop the Skrulls and he sacrifices his life in that way or something is infinitely more interesting than what actually happened.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's opportunities for stuff like that to be happening and they're just not doing it. They do the worst version of everything.
It's so bad. It really is. And I feel like one of the things, there's several things in this that make me upset that it's in the MCU, but one of them's like a series-wide problem of like Fury kind of sucked through the whole thing. And now I'm like, okay, looking back at his earlier appearances, it's like, oh, so he's just scrolling around this whole time. Fine. But it's also like, none of that was impressive. Like, it makes him less cool as a concept. And now going forward, it's like, like.
And this is going back to the idea that the first couple episodes set up a potentially very interesting arc where you have someone who was genuinely cool now dealing with like all this trauma from the blip and not knowing his place in the world and all this stuff, and then having to find it and come out on top again. And then they just don't do that at all. And every time they reveal something more, it's like, hey, remember that cool thing you thought Fury did? Actually, that was the Skrulls, and he's been doing not much this whole time. It's disappointing, to say the least.
It is. It really made his character so much worse. And just like full stop. Like, there was no redemption or whatever at the end. There was no like coming back around. Like, just kind of like him a lot less now, and that's where it is.
And this, we're gonna get into this with like another topic soon, but to keep with the fight and finish out my thoughts on this, another thing I have is that Super Scrolls are a cool concept, and I'm glad that they were included and that they were like, this is a thing we want to adapt and bring to the MCU. Again, they did it very poorly, but even the concept of Super Scrolls with random combinations of different superheroes' powers is a real thing. Is there a scroll with like 13 of them? No, that's not a thing. But you'll get one that's like half Wolverine and half Spider-Man or something, and it's just like this very random one too, and like that's cool. And I want to use the budget as an excuse, but I can't because it's such an expensive show, and I don't know where that budget went, that you couldn't have like a small group of Super Scrolls and they're the ones causing problems. I'm baffled by this decision to take two Skrulls, make them both Super Skrulls, and then just give them it's just so much. It's like something that I would come up with when I'm 12 and I'm just throwing names at the wall and I'm like, every hero in one character, isn't that a crazy idea? And then literally anyone who can think rationally is like, no, that's insane. And then me as a 12-year-old is like, you're right. Did that not happen in the right? I'm at a loss for words. I'm sorry. I just can't believe it. Can't believe it.
No, it was real bad. It was really bad.
Gravik as a scroll is surprisingly large. I think that had to do with the Super Scroll of it all, but he increased in size exponentially.
He had like very aggressive abs.
Yeah. Just massive pectorals. I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, that was
shit. Oh, all right. If he looked like that the whole time, I'd understand why people were afraid of him. But
he did, because he like briefly, I thought he briefly switched in like I think the last episode when he was like yelling at people, and he was more normal size.
Yeah, it has to be like the Hulk blood or something in him. Is Gravik, maybe he does heal and he shows up in the World War Hulks movie everyone is convinced is happening. Who's to say? Well, Gaia also has an ambiguous ending, and I have no clue where we would see Gaia next. But apparently she is not Abigail Brand that we know. She is just MCU Super Skrull, and she is Super Saiyan Skrull. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those classic overpowered problems, because it's like, why isn't she helping in this conflict later? If she is, why isn't she just fucking clearing? Like it. And so it's just like, where's she at? What's she doing? It just causes so many problems, like narratively and just like practically within the universe. And to your point, I'm sorry, she is literally has to be like the most powerful person on Earth. Like, and so it's like she's just like being sort of intimidated into working with Sonya. It's like, you can do whatever you want. Like, there's just
you can go find your people their own home now. You have Captain Marvel's powers. Go do that. I'm so confused.
But no, she's having to be like a bargained with, like as if she's got like all these weaknesses she has to make up for.
It's and not just the most powerful being on Earth. Like one of the most powerful beings in the universe, maybe just one step below like Galactus and cosmic entities, and then Gaia. That's where we're at now. Okay, well, there's other things to talk about. We could keep just talking about this repeatedly, but another plot line in this episode is that Gaia goes and takes care of Gravik, and Gravik and Fury are robbed of any genuine moments between each other in the finale. Fury goes to the hospital to get to President Ritson and be like, there are Skrulls, and then Rava in Rhodey's body is like, nah. And that was a whole big subplot over the course of 30 minutes. It ends with Rava being shot in the head and dying. And President Ritson, turns out he sucks. And he starts riots across the country, and they don't actually root the Skrulls out by the end of the show. They just make it not secret anymore. And so the season has to end.
Yeah, I mean, this may be jumping ahead, but I'm still going to go for it. But okay, the president gives his little speech.
Yeah.
He said, "We know how to find you."
No, you don't.
When did that happen over the
You
course
didn't.
of the
It's
last
an empty
2 hours?
threat.
You figured out how to find all the scrolls, because if you would have done that, you could have done that before. The US government apparently knew about scrolls, blah, 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 blah. That was the worst. I will say, the, like, little montage we get towards the end of, like, everyone killing each other, because everyone thinks everyone's a scroll or whatever. I think Sonya's one talking what's going on. But, maybe it's Fury. But I would have watched that.
Yeah.
That had, like, a good vibe to it of, like,
I wrote that in my notes too. 100%. I wrote. Continue. I'm sorry. We just keep doing that.
I was just gonna say that it felt, again, it was very short. I understand that, but it felt a lot more Winter Soldiery, like everybody kind of wanted from the show than that, and it just had so much more of that. Who do you trust?
Yeah.
vibe.
Well, because that's what Secret Invasion is supposed to be. Not necessarily. It's honestly an interesting adaptation to take a comic where, okay, the superhuman community knows about this for a lot of it, which in the comic too, at the end, everyone finds out because the Skrulls make this big speech, and then it's very similar. Like, there's panic and unrest, and no one trusts anyone anymore. And like, they ended this show where it should have started, and it's like, I just don't. That's what's so frustrating to me, and I doubt that the Marvels is going to be mostly about this. Like, they'll solve whatever this is by the end of the Marvels, but we won't ever actually explore the most interesting fallout of Secret Invasion, and that's frustrating. But yeah, I mean, the idea of taking Secret Invasion and making that a parallel to what's going on in the world, and have like unrest and neighbors turning on each other, and people are, shooting people on the streets because they think they're Skrulls. Like, that is so interesting. And Fury and co having to navigate a world going crazy before it kills itself is so interesting. And where it just doesn't. Fury's like, I see how the world is falling apart. I'm gonna go organize a peace summit. Okay, see ya. And he leaves. He leaves Earth again. What? Wasn't the whole arc supposed to be figuring out that that's not okay? Can't literally anybody else organize a peace summit between the Kree and the Skrull? Again, jumping ahead a little bit here, but why does Fury have to go do this?
He doesn't.
He doesn't. My guy does not care about Earth at all. He's like, it's done. I lost it. We're going elsewhere.
It's just so confusing because, like, his whole thing, one, he's been spending the last what years at the MCU, but since the 90s, like,
yeah,
taking care of this, and like,
it's been like 30 years.
Roles in theory trying to help them, but at a certain point, and he says this multiple times in the show, like, he basically gave up and didn't tell anyone because it's like hard to convince humans to like get along, which is true. But it's like, what does he care about? Like, it doesn't seem like he has any real goal, because it's like he doesn't fully care about Earth and what's happening, clearly, as you just said from this. And he didn't fully give a fuck about the Skrulls at a certain point either. So it's like, what is he doing? He didn't care about his wife that much either, for the most part. So I really don't know, like, what we're supposed to think his like goals, his convictions, his interests are at this point, because it seems like it's none of it.
I couldn't tell you what anyone in this show is thinking. I think that's the true secret of Secret Invasion. I don't know why anyone did anything that they did. Except for Talos, and they killed him. So, again, on all the people who died in the show, I'm like, why is that how you did it? I feel like I felt nothing. Yeah, so that's a much more interesting ending than anything that happened before it, but we're at 6 episodes, so it's over now. Yeah, I mean, the Tucker Carlson guy gets shot on TV, like, during a broadcast, which is insane. Like, I want to see, how do people react to that? How does that affect things? In terms of moving forward, along with Fury convincing Ritson about the Skrulls, and Rava dying, which, by the way, I wrote down in my notes as well. Rava is not actually, I don't think Rava's actually that good at being Rhodey, which is extra funny to me because she's just very on the nose with all of her plans. Like, she doesn't go in and subtly manipulate people. She just kicks down the door and says lines like, I quote, "It's the Russians 100%." And I'm like, if I was the president, I'd think, why do you hate the Russians so bad? This is not subtle at all.
I truly, yeah, I will say. I mean, it's one of those things. Okay, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but apparently Rhodey has been a Scrolling.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. We don't know for a fact, but context clues indicate it's been since Civil War.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, he hasn't been the Rava sassy or whatever you want to call that. Not that we've seen him a ton of times, but like in Endgame and like at the very end of Civil War, and even Falcon and Winter Soldier is like, eh.
The most Rava, well, the two most Rava things I think that Rhodey would have done previously were both in. Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on where does Rhodey, like, how sassy do we think Rhodey is anyway? Because there's the whole like, do we bow thing? There's the whole why don't we go back and like kill him that everyone joked about. That felt very Rava now that we look at it. When Peter Quill is dancing through 2014 and Rhodey kind of just whacks him in the face with his arm to knock him out, and it's sort of just like, I don't think this guy's so annoying. That's could be kind of Rava-ish. I don't know, like if we're stretching. But that also just feels Rhodey-ish. So I don't know.
And I really stand by. I really don't think anything that happened in Civil War Endgame had anything to do with, oh, he's a Skrull, we should add something in here to.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I'm curious to see how this plays out or where they go with this, because there's no indicators as to when Everett Ross was taken, but real Ross is back now, so we'll see how that plays out. But I don't know. You already have people wanted there to be some major Skrull reveal, and even though it was pretty anticlimactic, War Machine Rhodey being a Skrull since Civil War is probably the biggest one we get and closest thing to like a comic book level reveal that they did in the show. And people wanted that, and now they're upset because they're like, well, if he was a Skrull this whole time, that destroys all of his character development. I'm like, that's the fear that I had, but everyone was all gung-ho about this idea, and now that they've done, even in the worst way possible, they've done it, and people are going to be upset about it. I don't know. It just is. And now Armor Wars is going to be 50% about him being like, you mean Tony's dead? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I totally get what you're saying, because it's like, in theory, we want the stakes and the drama, but at the same time, nobody really wants to go back and watch some of those older things and be like, oh, he's a Skrull here, including me. And so, had they done it better, maybe they could have towed the line better and had it been more of like a not so upsetting situation versus just like, oh no, what's gonna happen in the future, versus like, oh god, the past sucks, and the future probably sucks. So yeah, it's a swing and probably a miss on that one.
Well, and I think that it's for me, it's not only just when you go back and watch older stuff, you think, oh, they're a Skrull, because that's annoying. But to a certain degree, if I'm rewatching Endgame one day, I can just forget about, like, I can just treat it as its own story and just pretend that that's not true. What's bothersome even more so for me is that because you do stuff like that, it works one way in the comics, but in movies and TV shows, I don't want, like, how many times now do we have to have someone being like, oh my god, Tony Stark died, I have to live in his legacy? Like, we have to do that again now. Yeah. And I don't want there to be 4 movies that all have the same subplot.
You're gonna get them.
That's my biggest qualm with it, is especially when you have I mean, it feels like a lot of projects coming all the time, and it is, but compared to comic books, you have so precious few movies and TV shows to explore characters and tell different stories and do all this stuff. So when you are making narrative choices that then make those stories repetitive or are just covering the same topics, it's like you don't have as much time as you think. Armor Wars is a really cool story, and I'm cool with the idea of it essentially kind of being like Iron Man 4, where Tony's gone and Rhodey has to step into like the Iron Man role and protect his legacy. That I'm cool with. That offers a lot of interesting possibilities. But now you're giving it a lot of the same undertones as the projects that came immediately after Endgame, years after Endgame. And it's like I get that Tony Stark is the founding father of the MCU, but he's like, you ended it. It's gone. I want to see Rhodey be Rhodey. I don't want it to be, can he do Tony Stark things, you know?
I I very much agree with what you just said. I feel like when they've been making projects since Endgame, a lot of them feel like right after Endgame, or maybe before, they were like, "This is a great idea." And as time passes, it's kind of like no one really cares anymore, and or
Yeah.
we've been waiting so long, we'd rather just move on.
It was
Uh,
a good idea at first,
yeah.
but you've done it multiple times, so go forward.
And to your point too, like in the comics, right? Like you're gonna have a lot more stories with a lot more characters kind of almost all the time. So it's easier to like move on and like develop from that versus we're gonna wait who knows how long at least for Armor Wars if it does happen.
Yeah.
4 years at least. Like it, and so it's just like by that point too, I feel like no one's really gonna care either. And
Yeah.
so like just diminishing returns as they do that. So
And I feel like not enough people watch this show where if they announce Armor Wars and people are going to the theaters and thinking, oh, this is basically Iron Man 4. I love the Iron Man movies. Let's go check this out. And that's what a big chunk of their general audience is. And they're going in to sit down and watch this movie. And then it opens with him being like, I've been a Skrull since Civil War. I didn't know my best friend. They're going to be like, what is happening? What are you talking about?
yeah.
It's just like an unnecessary, and especially years. It's not even like you can say, "Oh, this show just came out. Go check it out." Really, it's like, do you want to watch this season of this poorly received season of television from 5 years ago so that you get the prologue? Like, it used to work better, but I now it doesn't.
Yeah. It's upsetting. It really
It's
is.
upsetting. Looks down.
I mean, I'm not happy about it. I feel like until they someday keep going with this Scrody thing and make it better, I don't know if that'll even ever happen. But I'm just not gonna pretend it exists. To be real honest, like I'm just not gonna think about it because it sucks. And so that's unfortunate. I have not felt that way as an MCU fan before. I'm sure other people have. Fine, not arguing
Yeah,
with it, but I have not. And I can like get over things and suspend, disbelief, blah 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 blah. It's just this is just awful, and it affects too much. Like obviously not
yeah,
everything, but just too much.
yeah. No, I agree. I think this is the first time as a diehard lifelong fan of these projects that I've finished one and just thought that I just kind of wish that didn't exist. And you said that earlier, and I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but once you said it, I was like, yeah, I do kind of wish that if this is how it's gonna be, I wish it just didn't happen. I wish that we just took this time to focus more on the shows coming next.
To focus on ourselves.
Focus on ourselves. Yeah, I meant they took their time to like develop their later projects even more. I would have rather had an incredible Armor Wars movie that didn't mention Skrulls at all. Um, I yeah, I guess we could just keep talking about that over and over again, but there is at least one other storyline that I really want to get into. Okay, so the last thing we need to talk about, something that's been weighing on me for 6 episodes, and something that is kind of concluded here is Fury's relationship with his wife. I'm still kind of like, what the heck, you know?
Yeah, I really do think I mean, they fumbled a lot, but I feel like they fumbled like us caring about it. And part of it's the way they did it. It's not
Mhm.
just that we don't care. It's, yeah, but us caring. And also just like the way they played it out was not good. Like,
It was not good.
no part of me was like rooting for them at the end at all.
No.
It's like, I don't think you guys should be doing this.
No.
And so it's like, not only did I not care, it didn't make sense, and it was just like, this is dumb. Yeah, not good.
Yeah. I wanted to care because I mean I was really excited about it. I think if you remember, we talked about it in the second, was it the first or second episode? Second, they reveal.
Yeah.
I was excited about it because I thought it had so much potential to be such an interesting development in Fury's life and for him as a character, and then it just wasn't. The episode begins and ends with them. It starts with Fury calling her and her being like, this is the first time you've called this number in years. And he's like, I dialed all the time, baby, but I never call. And that's just sort of like, what the I wrote down in all caps, what is their relationship? Do they love each other or not? I was just confused. And also, what is the timeline here? Because weren't you just at her house like a day ago, 2 days ago? Every time they talk, they speak. It's like they haven't spoken in years. And at one point that was true, but that's not true anymore. So stop doing that.
They speak in poetry. They really just don't communicate in a normal way with words. I don't know.
Not at all.
They tried so hard to make every line Fury said like this, like, oh moment, you know, like a one line, like a thing. And it's just, honestly, I was over it in the first episode, to be honest. But as time went on, it's like, stop. Like, this man can speak normally and say normal sentences and not try to be cool every time he says something, because it's so bad.
Because he's Nicholas J. Fury, and that's how he talks.
I've seen him in other stuff. He doesn't always talk.
Yeah.
Like an action figure, and you're pulling a string and he's saying a cool line.
So that's how it starts, right? And then at the end of the episode, after shenanigans go on, Fury goes back home and he's like, I'm asking you for one more chance. And she's like, really? And he's like, yeah, but I'm also leaving tonight. And I was like, you idiot.
And then he started to leave.
No, and then he was just like, okay, guess it's not going to work out. And then he just left. And he tosses his wedding ring into the bin and has like a cool Fury exit. And I was like, I think you just got divorced. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, and then against all odds and all rationality, she shows up and is like, I'm going to space with you, baby. And he's like, I've always loved your scroll face. And then they kiss each other. And it's like a weird, I'm like,
too long. It just really lingered too long. I mean, again, partly
it was a long kiss. It was a long kiss.
Yeah, I don't care about the relationship, so I'm not like, yeah, at all. But then I'm just like, why am I still watching?
M. Jackson's face got stuck in the prosthetics. He was like, They just kept filming. He sold it. He's an actor. He's a professional.
Well, okay, when she shows up, presumably like as a surprise, like I still love you, woo, you know, he was like, oh yeah, I need you for this like these summits. Like, you were leaving.
You were gonna dip. You do not need her. Also, what is her job? What does she do? She's like, my work is here. And I'm like, what is your work? Has this ever been specified? As far as I know, you kind of just sit at home a lot.
I didn't know if she was referring to like scroll work, like she needs to help.
Yeah, where she's like really into being a doctor or something now.
Yeah, I'm still being whatever this lady was. And I don't know why I was at the hospital in the first place to take on her opportunity, but I was.
And then Fury's randomly like, you're the best diplomat the Skrulls have ever had. And I was like, since when? Why were you not capitalizing on this the whole time? Is she a politician? Is that what this has been, though? That's valuable.
Yeah, because all we really saw was her like introducing him to Gravik in that really quick flashback. That was it.
She's just been like Fury's estranged wife since. That's been her whole personality since then.
Yeah, she was clearly like some sort of spy for him because she like slid him some papers or something at one point. But that's it.
I just, in the last couple of minutes, there's so many questions. All this information, they kiss for a long time, they go off together, and she's like, I can only go with you for a little bit, then I gotta leave. And it's like, all right, cool. Fury talks about Saber. He's like, we can use you on Saber. I still don't know what the difference between sword and saber is. I don't think that we've established this.
Have we established sword at all, though? Like, that's what I'm confused. I think
sword was a thing in WandaVision, and then it came up again in something else. So like they established sword as a thing. Like it is.
Yeah, I feel like I've been like gaslit about sword because I totally forgot because since then they've never mentioned it. And then it's saber, and it's like, was that what that was in the first place? I'm so confused.
I think
Yeah.
maybe Far From Home or No Way Home, like name drop sword or something. I'm not 100% sure. But it's come up more than once, and then suddenly in the show it's like saber, and I think in the trailer for the Marvels it's also saber. I'm like, what, did you switch it? Why? There's no reason. Is saber specifically the space station and it's like the headquarters? Is like saber the Triskelion of sword? I don't know.
You would think though, if the MCU is trying to like lay the foundation for sword as a thing, you'd think they'd mention it if it
Yeah.
had any relation to it,
Yeah.
which is also confusing because why wouldn't it to some
it's-
extent? Like that's what we assume
If
Fury's.
saber is just the space station, right? That's even funnier because that means that my universe, they're talking like someone pitched that. They're like, what are we going to call the headquarters for sword? And someone else was like, what's another word for sword? And and they went with it.
They're crushing it.
They're crushing it creatively. They have no bad ideas. It's knocking it out of the park left and right. So yeah, these are all questions that I'm not sure I have answers to, and that bother me quite a bit. And also, Fury randomly is like, yeah, in everything that's been going on, I've also been informed that the Kree are ready for peace talks. So, and that is clearly something thrown in there just to be like, and this is how we get Fury from this show to the Marvels movie. And like, okay, but we weren't talking about the Kree. No one cares.
Really, and it's like I get Fury was like trying to help him on Earth, and again, he was terrible at it. But since when is he any kind of intermediary between other space people and the Skrulls? He's not. I mean, Captain Marvel could be, but Fury's not been doing that. He's been, well, who knows where the fuck he's been, but he's not been helping the Skrulls in space since, ever.
It's funny because it's such a random, like if earlier in the show there had been a line with where Fury's like, yeah, and we could get all the Skrulls off Earth if we could just get the Kree to come to terms on a peace treaty or something, right? And then at the end he's like, I've heard the Kree. It would still be kind of lazy, but at least it would be set up and we would know why that's so important at the end. But instead he's sort of just like, hey baby, I gotta go run this peace summit. You wanna hop in my space hot rod and with the roof down and go? And she's like, sure thing, buddy. And then they go. That's my summary of that.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
that's what happened.
Uh,
exactly what happened.
That's more or less exactly what happened. That's mostly what I have to say about this episode, to be honest. I'm just disappointed. I feel like there's a lot of ways it could have gone better as a series. I think the one good thing in this episode that I genuinely really liked, again, I know it's not Fury and it was Gaia and Fury's disguise, but when Gravik does give that speech about like why he hates Fury so much and how like Fury is the reason Earth is condemned to die, and he's like going off, I thought that was a really good like pocket performance, and the dialogue was actually not terrible and kind of somewhat interesting, and it just like was kind of almost immediately undermined because the real Fury never actually had to hear it. But if he had, maybe it would have made his arc a little better. I don't know.
But it didn't.
Much like a lot of this show, it's something that felt like something, but ultimately was nothing. And that's, I think, the best way I can sign out and leave off. I'm disappointed that Agent Prescod didn't solve this invasion myself, but now it feels out of hand, and I feel like I'm kind of glad I didn't get involved. And I might just stay dead because, I don't know, I think we peaked with me and then went downhill. And that's where we're at.
We peaked in the first 3 minutes.
We peaked in the first 5 minutes that they released online early. Yep. And it's been downhill from there. Now we know why they only dropped 5 minutes. Am I right?
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof. I can say is oof. It's just bad. And I truly, the fact that we've left off in such a bad place, like I truly, we do have, I can't get, like, Gaia is essentially an original character. I know there was a scroll somewhere named Gaia in the comics, but like that's not really what's happening here. So we have this original character who is, as you said, one of the strongest beings in the universe, just walking around now. I'm like, why?
It's so funny to me that they were like, we're doing the Super Scroll. And they're like, cool. And they're like, we're going to make you think that the MCU Super Scroll is going to be this guy named Gravik. But at the end of the show, it's actually going to be Talos' daughter, Gaia. Okay, cool. And she will have the power of 30 to 50 different characters. And we will potentially never see her again. Okay, great. Good pitch.
I agree. Absolutely wild. This was really bad. That's all I can say. And it's just, it's like famously bad. I swear I open up just like my Apple News app.
Yeah.
It's just like headlines and headlines of this is the worst thing ever. Like, why did Marvel do this? This
It's
is
the
tomato score of any Marvel thing ever. Like, finale reveals where the budget went, kind of to your point, but nothing else. Like, it's so
yeah. And I don't like being aggressively hateful or anything about anything. So for me, it's just tiring because I'm like, I can sit here and complain about it forever and I can keep making points. But at the end of the day, I'm just yelling at a computer screen. And no one needs that. No one wants that. If you've watched this, let this be the one video that you've watched, viewers at home, and then don't think about this show ever again until the next Marvel thing when they have to reference it.
see you in November.
Say in November. I don't even know what the next show is, to be honest. What is the next show? I forget the order of release.
Have they announced like legitimately when the next show is? Like,
I mean, Echo is like November, but they're doing like a 1-day release.
Oh, okay. I missed that bit. Oops.
I think. Yeah, Echo is at the end of this year, but I don't know if there's anything between.
Yeah, because they definitely had a bunch planned and then started spacing them out, casually. Like, oh yeah,
and we'll have to do
continue
different.
to do so probably.
You'll see. I mean, I might be Agent Prescod. I might have a new identity by then. Who's to say? Maybe I've been a Skrull. That no. See, nothing that interesting is going to happen here or in the show, so it's fine. Yeah, that'll be different form of coverage because we won't be able to do weekly. It's going to be they're just dropping everything at once, so we'll just have to cover the whole thing. But we don't have to do anything if we want to. Okay, well, with that, thank you all for watching. I have been Agent Prescod over the last month and a half. Agent Mary has been the one person keeping me sane. And now that this is over, who knows? Maybe I'll just start drawing on my walls. So
Excited for you.
have a good rest of your summer, folks. Any parting words, Agent Mary?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Goodbye.